So another article going after Bernie here is also from The Hill. This one is a little bit funny because it's just purely Red Scare, Cold War, McCarthyism bullshit. The title of the piece is Sanders' Trip to Soviet Union Comes Under New Scrutiny. So basically the entire article, I'm not going to read it because it's comical, but I'm just going to explain to you guys that this whole article is about how Bernie Sanders went to the Soviet Union for for his honeymoon. He went with Jane Sanders, his current wife, and because he was previously married. So he went on this honeymoon, and I think it was 1988. It says here, and he went on this honeymoon, and he went to the Soviet Union, and he made some comments. One of the people was a Republican that went with him. They were really triggered by that, and he was like, "Oh my God, how dare you say that? I can't stand this. I'm going to leave," because Bernie Sanders said something that was against the United States in Russia. Another person says, I suspect that what Bernie saw in Russia probably affected his views that you see today, where he is not anti-free enterprise or capitalism, but he wants to have a safety net and give a fair shake to all, but certainly not to have a command economy we saw in the Soviet Union. So yeah, Bernie Sanders may have supported what the Soviet Union or Russia was doing back in 1988, but that has nothing to do with right now. If you ask him his views on the Soviet Union, which obviously doesn't exist, Soviet Union fell, it's no longer around. So if you ask him what he thinks of Soviet Union now, if you were to ask him now, he'd probably tell you something completely different. But basically what this article is saying is that, hey, look at these, scary, controversial views that Bernie Sanders had, 30 years ago, and then we're going to use that now. So basically what the article wants to say is the Republicans are going to use these attacks against him. Donald Trump is going to use this attack against him. And I'm going to be getting into an article after this one that's kind of says the same thing. But yeah, it's basically trying to pretend as if, like, oh my God, look at all this baggage that the Republicans have on Bernie Sanders. Let's put aside the fact that he wants to give people, affordable health care. He wants to give people a living wage. He doesn't want any wars he doesn't want to have any wars, get rid of, end all the fucking stupid endless wars that we're involved in. Stop intervening in countries, sovereign countries, and in countries that we shouldn't be involved in. Don't go to war with Iran. Don't go into Venezuela. Although I think his narrative on Venezuela has been a little bit shaky. Last time I checked, he said I think he was following along with the narrative that Juan Guaido, I think his name is pronounced, he's supposedly the interim president of Venezuela instead of Nicolas Maduro. Apparently Bernie Sanders has gone along with that. That's very, very disappointing. I think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did the same exact thing. Very unfortunate. But generally, I think Bernie Sanders is against interventionism, and I do believe that he would fight against that. And if he wouldn't, his supporters like myself and all the other people that I'm affiliated with, they would definitely fight against that. If they knew that Bernie Sanders was going to be advocating in favor of going into Venezuela, going in, bombing Iran and, sucking up to Israel and all that stuff, there's no way anybody would stand up for that. There's absolutely no way. Now, the fact that he's doing it now, people have to definitely hold him accountable to that much more. I'm trying to. I hope a lot of other people are, and I know they are, because I've seen that. So that's. It's definitely good that. It's definitely good that Bernie Sanders advocates on behalf of, no wars, but just don't be selective with like Venezuela and be like, just because you want, you just like ironically, we're talking about Russia in this case. Just like when it comes to the Russiagate narrative, when it comes to Russiagate, Bernie Sanders has pushed a lot of that Russiagate narrative, and it's very unfortunate because he wasn't doing that before, and or he wasn't doing it very much. Like in general, Bernie, at least from what I've seen, Bernie doesn't talk about Russia a lot. when it comes to all the Russia gate, Russia hacking, whatever, election hacking bullshit. He doesn't focus on it too much, but he has done it to an extent that it's pissed some people off. But I definitely don't see it as his main focus, because he's not into all that, Red Scare, McCarthyism, bullshit, manufacturing stuff, because he also knows that he doesn't want America, he doesn't want the United States to go to war with Russia because of a supposed, hacking of an election. And that's why he's voted against like Russia sanctions and stuff. And people are like, why did you vote against Russia sanctions? Are you a Russian puppet? Are you a agent of the Russians? And this article is trying to pretend like he's an agent of the Russians, but it's gonna go to the extent that the Republicans are also gonna go after him. So this is an appeal to both the Republicans and Democrats, unfortunately, who are just gonna be like, okay, well, you took a honeymoon to the Soviet Union 30 years ago, and then you voted to not sanction Russia. By the way, sanctions against countries mostly affect the people, not the government. So that should be. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't affect the government at all, but a lot of times it affects the people too. Innocent people that are just living their lives, and they're being sanctioned by a completely, by a country in their minds for no reason. And what did they do wrong, right? So, but because Bernie voted against sanctions, for Russia, they get on him about that. One time he voted against sanctions, I believe it was in either 17 or 18, because it was tied into sanctioning Iran. And putting sanctions on Iran would have destroyed the Iran nuclear deal, which President Obama pushed for, which was one of his biggest accomplishments. And now, obviously, Trump, he shot down that nuclear agreement. He got out of it, and he's trying to get Iran to get out of it, or he's basically kind of poking and prodding them to get out of it. But this fear mongering stuff about Russia, it's just like it's reaching so far to try and pretend like he's some sort of communist, or because he's made these comments 3 decades ago that he must be a Russian agent, but he must also be a communist. But then even though he's a democratic socialist and believes in capitalism, he believes in a heavily regulated form of capitalism, for sure. I mean, that's what democratic socialists believe in. They don't believe in a completely free market where everybody gets to do whatever the fuck they want, and banks get to screw over people, and we have zero regulations on Wall Street. No, Bernie Sanders does not believe in that. He believes in a heavily regulated market. Wall Street being regulated to the absolute prim, to the full extent that they can, so they're not too big to fail, and they're not giving out toxic loans and mortgages and stuff. So. Yeah. The Bernie Sanders Russia narrative is always going to exist, but unfortunately it exists on both sides, and both sides are paranoid as fuck on that shit. So you can't even you can't get a clear idea of who's crazier. Is it the Democratic loyalists and centrists, or the Republicans? I always thought it was the Republicans that were paranoid about that stuff, but obviously with the Russiagate stuff, now it's the Democratic loyalists that are pushing that shit more. So it's just it's like a two-pronged, these kind of articles, it's like a two-pronged outreach to these specific constituents, I guess, if you want to call them, audiences, that they'd be like, oh my God, Bernie Sanders, the Russian agent and Russian puppet.